So I'm bringing this, not a dinosaur, but a crocodile presentation, because I do this on kind of a yearly basis now, where I'm kind of giving a public service announcement about mainframe and how it's still around, how we can bring it forward with us into the future. It's not going anywhere. Some small companies will not have any, but any large corporation, especially in the Des Moines area, anything financial or insurance, they all have some sort of mainframe. So that's kind of where I started doing this. That's loud. All right, so I am Russ Penning. I'm now a technical account manager for Tasktop Industries, which is, I've been there since October now. So, but my previous was a DevOps engineer. So my first IT role was as a COBOL mainframe developer for Nationwide, and that's how I got started. Then I moved on to a DevOps engineer role within Nationwide, and then as a DevOps engineer role for principal after that. I was 5 years as the acting director of the DevOps for Enterprise Systems User Group Conference that was held around the United States. That was a really big part of my goal when I got into mainframe modernization, was to go along this route and see what other companies were out there that had this initiative going on, and it ended up being massive. I mean, these DevOps user groups meetings, they ended up being 20 to 30 different companies, 50 to 60 different people, and it was huge. So you get to see and hear all the different stories that all these other organizations have from a problem with mainframe modernization. So since that point, when I started down that role, I've done lots of different things. 7 different programming languages and other roles and other things facilitating there. I mean, as a DevOps engineer, I was required to learn a large subset of different technologies. But my focus and my desire and passion always fell with mainframe, which is really weird because I think most people think it's like a swear word. Like you mentioned, even when I went to Tasktop and I started there, I started talking about mainframe modernization. They're like, "What is a mainframe?" It's like you're an IT tech company, you don't know what a mainframe is. So yeah, I got started on the rational tool set. I'm sure a lot of people who've done mainframe development are familiar with the rational tools: RTC, RDZ, RQM, doors. All right, so what is Tasktop? I'm going to go through a little brief interview, or not interview, but a brief discussion, just kind of like what Tasktop is and why I'm kind of here now. But Tasktop is a value stream management solution. So it's one that's obviously it's a vendor solution. I'm not here as a vendor, but it's allowed me to work with a lot of different tools at a very large capacity in a short period of time. So then now my role is a lot more towards doing value stream architecture diagrams, doing stuff like that, going into companies and helping them, stretch out their software delivery lifecycle, how it applies to, from a portfolio management standpoint, all the way to release, and helping tie those things together. That's why I wanted to go to Tasktop to begin with. It's a very, very small company. I went to 2 massive, large organizations, and to a company that has 172 employees across 9 countries. So it's a much more remote access, and I work out of my house, which is kind of fun. So this is just kind of a list of some of the connectors that I get to work with on a daily basis. So I get to play around with a lot of tools, and it's a lot of fun. So then I get to integrate these tools together at some capacity through like a bunch of different integration points that we have. So as you can see, there's probably many on this list that you would recognize. There's many of them that are sitting outside of the table, right outside the door here that we work with. And then there's some that we've partnered with throughout the years and continue to go through that process. And this list grows. I mean, I've been there since October, and we added 6 additional ones since October. So it just keeps going. So my main reason for joining Tasktop is the guy in the middle there. He was my boss when I worked at Nationwide. He was just a fun individual to work with, a wealth of knowledge. Absolutely loved working underneath him. When he retired from Nationwide, he went on to do some consulting work for Tasktop, and that's where he kind of said, "Hey, if you're looking for something, I think you'd be a really good fit for this new technical account manager role," which I absolutely loved. But now I get to work with all 3 of these people. Big, huge names inside the value stream management space, all across the board. I mean, Mick released his book back in October, and now he's traveling the world doing presentations all over the place. So even at the keynote yesterday morning, we brought up the book or his list of recommended books, and of course Project to Product was on there. It's a huge book, and obviously a big selling point for TaskTop, but it's more important that I do like the focus on moving from project to product and how it fits within the mainframe space. So that's how I started going down this role. So this is the framework that Mick has established. It's called the flow framework. It's your ability to scale out and still capture all of your flow items, so flow metrics, your ability to capture your different metrics along the way without a single tool space. It's across the board end to end. I'm not going to go into that because it's all in his book. It's all there. But so now this is a sample of what I get to do right now. So working with customers, I get to go through their software space, actually all across from one end of the life cycle to the other, and capture these different tools they're using. They're different teams typically. They're different, places within an organization that want to get visibility into where everybody else is working, what they're doing. You have, say you want a team that wants to stay in ServiceNow and handle defects, but everything else is created within Jira or TFS. I mean, you saw the list of tools that are out there. If you want to have them separated out and still getting the same information back and forth, we connect them together and do that space. So that leads me back to mainframe development, and it's dead. I've been told that mainframe development is dead pretty much since I started in the software space, and it continues to get bigger, right? I was born in '83, and it wasn't dead then. It's still not dead now. So 220 billion, this is just an estimate, right? And this is actually from an article that was done, I think, 3 years ago, right? 220 billion active lines of COBOL code in the world today, right? That's a lot out there. So when it comes time for someone to support that, right? Another little tidbit. So there's nearly 60,000 Google searches every second. Well, there's 1.1 million CICS transactions every second. So all across the board from a transactional space, there is still a ton of work being done in mainframe, and we can't really ignore that fact. So the problem, that's really what I'm focused on addressing, is trying to not just mainframe modernization, but as an overall whole in the image. I mean, mainframe modernization is a piece of it, but we also have other things we have to do from an adoption standpoint, other things we have to do from getting new people. So IBM states, this is from their study 2 years ago, that the average age of the mainframe developer is 55 to 60 years old. I've worked with 2 companies that were specifically on the mainframe, and the average age was 47 years of age and 51 years of age in those 2 companies. So it's still a problem, and I think that like CA puts it at 47% of developers were over the age of 50 in 2017. As we get down that path and we start to talk about what's the long road and what's that look like, in 10 to 15 years, there's gonna be a lot of large corporations that are in some major, major trouble. So as people, I've said it to many, many companies at various capacities, and I'm not shy to being harsh when I say that in 10 to 15 years, all of your mainframe developers are going to either retire or die, right? I was like, I'm sorry, but that's the real process, right? It was actually a really good conversation I had with one of the Atheon guys yesterday, because he was talking about an RPG story. He was trying to do, bringing in mainframe developers, specific RPG developers, into a place down in Omaha. And they wanted to fill 35 positions for RPG. But he had trouble finding like 2 people that could fill that role. And the company wanted to keep it in the Omaha area, right? And they wanted to say, we want local people, we want them to come work on site. And after months of this, they finally changed their mind. Like, okay, we get it. We can't really, stick to this. We filled 3 of these 35 roles, after 6 months. So they branched out, and he was telling me that they started reaching out to people that are retired in Florida and bringing them out of retirement to come back and work on RPG. and then offering more remote locations that could do this stuff. And that's the kind of situation that we're running to. We're doing that now. Imagine what it's going to be like in 10 to 15 years. So I had to bring up this because it's one of my favorites. So. I hear the chuckles, and we laugh a little bit, but in all seriousness, this is exactly what it's like, right? This is the situation that we're in. Like, you're old, you've been around 30, 40 years, you probably know mainframe, right? You're hired. So this has been one of my favorites because all these large corporations that I talk to and that I work with, and I've done some, pro bono type, consulting with these around mainframe and where they're at and the health of it and all that stuff. And they said, we don't need any help. We're in maintain mode, right? And that's what I get across the board all the time. Well, the last place that I did this at, they said they're in maintain mode, right? We are no longer creating new COBOL applications. Well, the problem is the business has this many things they want to accomplish, right? And when it comes to a resource need problem, you have this many Java developers that are in there. And after that Java work is done, the business still wants to complete this stuff. They still want to move forward, and we still need to have this in that small time frame. Well, the only people left to complete that work is the mainframe development team, right? And so you say, we'll just build this in COBOL, right? It's just a one-time thing. We're only going to do this just this time, right? And it's absolutely not the truth at all. So, I mean, even over the course of a year, they said that they were in maintain mode and continued to stick to that. Executive level said that was the case. Anything below that said that was the case. Just what I was able to witness was 507 new COBOL applications over the course of 1 year. So 1 year, but they're in maintain mode, right? So when you think that you don't have a problem and there's such a lack of visibility between what's actually occurring and what's being told from the top down, you're going to run into these kinds of situations, right? And when you need something done really, really fast, and you have people who are 25, 30-year-old or 30-year experienced COBOL developers, you won't get much faster than that. Like, they will complete it and in a hurry, and they're efficient, super efficient. So yeah, so that's how that disconnect happens there. You think you're doing all of this work to move forward and become a futuristic company, but you're still continuing to put resources towards stuff that needs to be accomplished because the business is typically not willing to slow down. If you go back and you tell the business, okay, we need to cut this in half, right? We want to say half of the work that you currently are asking for now is going to be completed in the next year. They're going to punch you in the face. So, I'm serious. Okay, so here's kind of like my first attempt, because I've been doing this for 8 years now, trying to push the mainframe modernization stuff. And I figured some things out along the way that worked really, really well, and I was just missing some of the pieces. But here's kind of like my first attempt at mainframe modernization. So I had a plan, right? I needed to find a champion, right? Someone like myself who was a SME in the rational space. They could push mainframe modernization. They could really drive that. And then from the tooling aspect, give them all the newest, latest, greatest tools that you possibly could and shove it in their face from a mainframe modernization perspective. You're going to use RDZ now. You're going to use RTC for source code management. You're going to do all these things. And then offered a variety of styles of training. Training was a big thing for me. So I wanted to offer large group training. I wanted to offer small group training. I wanted to offer one-on-one training and then support afterwards. That's probably the most successful aspect of my process. And then executive level support, which had me fall flat on my face over and over again. But other than that, I tried for it. So your champion, they would essentially be a unicorn, right? Because someone under the age of 40 who's passionate about mainframe development, yes, they're a unicorn. Good luck with that. I'm 35, and I get laughed at when I'm say I'm passionate about mainframe development. You need to find someone in that 30 to 40-year-old range that can drive this tooling out and provide support throughout the process for the next 10 to 15 years. They're going to be able to survive, right? The tools, I don't care what tools you choose. There's really, I mean, there was only one when I started, but there's probably a little bit more now. Like I can think of, like IBM, the CA, Zebia Labs, the teaming up with CA, that kind of stuff. Urban Code moving over to IBM. These are tools that are found within the mainframe space, and that continue to grow. There's a much more push towards automated testing right now in the mainframe space. A little more difficult to do, right? And there are not a lot of solutions there that are available. But if we have to continue going forward and build that, and I knew that, so I wanted to bring in whatever I could find, which was the latest and greatest at that time. So as I was going through that process, I kind of realized that something was left behind. I mean, I pushed this for a long time. I mean, the first place I did it, we saw like 300% usage growth, right? And that's because nobody was using it before, so the only way you can go is up, right? But I was really missing something in this. So all of the tools and the processes were set up, but the culture change that I was hoping to drive was not coming with it, right? And I think that's kind of a big thing when it comes to that. A culture is, essentially, culture eats strategy for breakfast? Isn't that the quote? Culture is a big piece of things, and that was one that I was really, really missing. I was trying to drive it, I really was, from a DevOps perspective as well as a mainframe perspective, like making it fun for people to use mainframe again, like do gamification, right? Have someone who's doing it the old way and someone who's using a new tool sit side by side and do races to see who could complete tasks the fastest. It was fun. Like, I was really trying to go down that space, but at the end of the day, there was still these big monolithic projects that need to be done in the mainframe, where distributed was something that could be done quickly, could be spun up quickly. And cloud, obviously cloud is ridiculously small and fast when it comes to operate in that space. So what I was seeing was this mainframe just continually got left behind, right? So as this happens, as you decide that you're going to continue investing into cloud and distributed assets, what I was witnessing and from my personal feelings, as well as talking to others, as well as going through the process myself, that mainframe got left behind all the time, right? And so you had all this money and all this effort being pushed into second and third platform work, whereas mainframe was still there. It wasn't going away. It wasn't diminishing. And you no longer had support for it, right? You said, okay, we have this bucket of people that we're going to essentially put in a closet with no windows and one door, and we're going to lock the door, and you complete all of your work, but don't talk to anybody else. Right? That's essentially how it felt all the time. So executives didn't want to put money into something that they felt was temporary, right? They all had this big idea that in 5 years there's going to be no more mainframe left, right? And based on my calculations, I think the last company I worked for could have maybe got off of the mainframe at 10 to 15 applications per year, which is still very aggressive. They could have got off of it by 2073. So, I mean, if you want to wait around for that to happen, then by all means, go do so, right? But it was really difficult to push that from an executive level standpoint because they just don't get it. They're not on that level. They don't understand it. You got to provide data to them, which was perfectly fine. I'll capture the data. I didn't know what data was available at that time. I do now. But the enterprise urgency is just never felt, right? So this leads into a reduction of engagement. The people who are within the COBOL space, I mean, some of them were already kind of grumbly and hated life kind of feeling, but many of them just didn't feel engaged anymore. They weren't part of the team, right? They wanted to come into work, get their work done, and then skip out. Many of them looked for other jobs. Many of them felt in the last several years they were sinking ships, right? And they needed to jump and go somewhere else. They're not feeling like they are needed at this time, right? I will tell people who are my age or between 30 and 40 who know mainframe development, I said in 10 to 15 years, you will essentially be able to get whatever you want from a dollar amount, because consulting on COBOL mainframe development, I mean, not just COBOL, assembler, PO1, RPG, COBOL, from mainframe space, in 10 years, they can switch from full-time jobs to consulting and make twice as much money. I guarantee it. So because there will be such a need in that space and nobody there to fill it. So I continue to say that over and over again. So Carmen, I was talking about Carmen earlier. He has this book out at Standing on Shoulders, a Digital Transformation. In there, he has a section where he really talks about legacy and what it means. And so I wanted to make sure to bring this quote up. It was one of my favorite parts of the book. So he said, well, while it's great to talk about accelerating delivery, deploying in the cloud, and automated techniques, if this message is that it only applies to some areas or people, then it often leads others to feel left behind. Right? Therefore, the message needs to be that if you really want to change the culture and affect people's mindset, you need to demonstrate that you are invested in all of your associates and willing to help them develop in the skills that they need to be a part of it. Right? That's where I started to push more towards people who knew mainframe development, try to get them to learn Java. It's not an easy jump. I did it. You know, it's just one of those things. It takes time, it takes effort. You saw the early adopters at any age slide in the previous presentation. You can still have it now. Some of the best people that I was able to get to go through a mainframe modernization were people that were over 50. So if you could sell it to them in a way that says, hey, this is not replacing your current work. You know, this is trying to make your job easier, because it really is. Like, we're telling you that these 37 keystrokes can be solved by right-clicking on this object and executing it. How would you not want to go down that route? If you can sell it that way, then it's going to be presentable. So this was part of like going to TaskTop, put the pieces together for me. Right? It was kind of nice to get to talk with Mick and get to talk with Carmen again, and going down that process. Like, it was a light bulb kind of turned on, right? So what I wasn't doing really was considering mainframe as part of the product, right? If you're no longer looking at things by a specific piece of technology, if you're looking at stuff from a specific project perspective, I have this project, I want it to be completed in COBOL. I have this project I want to be completed in Java. If you start to look at things as more of a product and more of an ownership standpoint, I mean, they say that you can't win a race when only part of the car goes fast, right? And that's kind of what we're looking at here. If you consider the mainframe as part of the product, like if you have a team that's built around owning the specific product, it shouldn't essentially matter how that stuff gets completed, right? As long as you understand that you support this product as a whole. If you have something that comes in to that product from a change standpoint, and you say, would this be best implemented with Java? Would this be best implemented with the mainframe? As long as you own this product as a whole, you're going to continue to have more of that cross-culture opportunities, right? If you start to have people who, sit together that know COBOL, that know Java, you're going to continue to bulk up that space. But it really should be about owning that, like the mainframe as part of the product. Understanding that I have I have things in the background that are running on the mainframe, and that's part of my product. I have things that are running in the middle that are part of my product, and I have front-end user-facing objects that are part of that product as well. When you start to think about that as one specific product, then you can move towards that culture change. You can move towards that ability to support it regardless, right? You no longer say, I'm going to forget about the mainframe and only focus on the front-end changes, right? Unless something breaks, and then you're like, well, it's the mainframe's fault. So here's the big piece that I was kind of missing, and that was the importance of integration. I had helped bring TaskTop into Nationwide, and I was part of trying to do some stuff at Principal with bringing TaskTop in as well, specifically to solve this space. Because once I realized that it was all about the integration and the visibility, then I really understood as a whole that I only had part of the puzzle before. Right? When you can start to integrate your tools together, right? Even if you have, say, a mainframe team that's working within RTC, they do all their source code management there, they do all their work item management in there, and then you have everybody else is working in Jira, right? They're doing all their work out of Jira. They all need to bubble up to the same exact, whether it's a project management tool like a CAPPM, something in that space, and they all roll out, typically, ideally, to the same release management space as well. But they're separated in development, then there's kind of a disconnect there. If you have complete visibility and be able to integrate these two tool sets together from a metric standpoint, you can begin to understand the overall flow of your work, right? If you can say, everybody that's using RTC, this is their flow of work through there. Everybody that's using RTC, this is their flow of work through there. You can start to get reporting on it. You can start to really capture the flow and then increase collaboration, right? I mean, you're not going to have, I don't like the idea of two-speed IT, that COBOL is going to work in 12-month increments, but yet we're going to have monthly releases from a distributed standpoint. It makes zero sense to me whatsoever. There's a difference in how things are completed, but then you start having all the excuses like governance, right? I've worked with governments. Don't try to work against it, right? But all of that stuff in that space, you continue to have, different kind of things that pop up in there that make it difficult for you potentially. If you're integrating your stuff together and you're all in one space, then you can continue to tell that story as a whole. Like you begin to own your product, right? And you say, this is how fast we're completing things for that product. You're not focused on a specific technology. All right. So if for instance, if like a CA/PPM feature gets broken down into stories and then integrated with like rational team concert where the mainframe developers are doing their work, and then a specific build is tied to a release that goes into production. Like if a defect is found and logged in something like ServiceNow, right? And then as a mainframe ticket, which automatically opens a bug in RTC, that team that identifies the defects, that team that works within ServiceNow, without having to leave their tooling space, can create a defect, identify it as a mainframe fix, and it automatically creates a bug within RTC for it to be addressed and completed. When that bug is completed, then it automatically syncs back up and closes within a ServiceNow standpoint with all your comments, with all your work that's been done, any test cases that you had along the way, anything from that standpoint, all gets brought with you. All right, so what I was trying to show was just kind of how you can go between all those spaces, even though you might have 3 different teams using 3 different tools. They all have the same visibility to the same information. Right? As long as you're integrating your tools together, you can get to that point. You can say, end-to-end capture of metrics is wonderful. I mean, being able to get stuff within like your, if you capture stuff within the software delivery lifecycle just from a development standpoint, you're only catching a piece of the puzzle. You really want to be able to branch out and see your full end-to-end flow of artifacts, right? And that's really what you're after from a business standpoint. I mean, that helps to the previous presentation. That helps tell the story of where your gaps are at, right? Where you have blockers. You can begin to address that as a whole. So this is where I got to the eliminating the 2-speed approach. So the keys that I found in kind of eliminating that 2-speed approach and trying to work towards the right direction. Right? I mean, the end goal may to be replace the mainframe. Everybody says that, right? But as for now, you gotta have a way to support it. You want to be able to take that space with you in this journey. You don't want to completely isolate those people and take them off to the side. So creating an inclusive culture is absolutely number one, the most important piece. Right? You want them to feel like part of the team. You want them to be involved in that. I still like the idea of a modernized, tool set. I think that if you can begin to move people to a modernized tool set, you also begin to tell the story to younger developers again. People coming out of college, and right now, if you tell them that they're going to go work on a green screen emulator, it's just not going to happen. It's really not. But executive level support continues to be of the highest importance. And it's also the most difficult one, just be able to tell the story. I would suggest getting as many people as possible to help you tell that story. Come back with, if you're integrating your tools together, you come back with actual data. You can come back and tell them, this is why we need to continue putting money into this effort, right? And then, the integrated tool chain has been really helpful. That was the missing piece for me, right? Being able to not only put people in this space, but give them the metrics and the reporting that they didn't have before, that they could take back to everybody else and say, hey, we have an issue here. Maybe we jump all in on it to try to fix this issue. All right, and then moving to product-based model instead of the project-based model. Right, I think that's a huge piece. Right, and a lot of large organizations are having a difficult time moving to a product-based model because they are so huge and monolithic in the way they do things. They're still pushing out a new feature every 2 years, not like 2 weeks. So yeah, so the bonus, right? So any steps that you make in that direction are really considered a win, and helping to recruit new talent as well. Because you got to fill those roles. Somebody has to support mainframe after everybody else is gone in 10 to 15 years. So otherwise you end up with a huge issue. We started with that. It needs to be of focus, and you need to find ways to bring in young talent. That's where I get into the second point. Stop listing jobs based on languages, right? If you're going to reach out there for talent and you're looking for people that you want, passionate people who want to make a change, they want to be heard, and they want to be part of the company, right? They want something they can actually put time and effort to. Don't list that you are looking for a COBOL developer. List that you are looking for someone to support a specific product and is passionate about learning. Because I guarantee you that anybody is out there who is passionate about development is going to be able to pick up COBOL development very, very easy. It's not something that's difficult to do. And from a Java space to a mainframe space, it's much easier to transition that way than to start in COBOL and go the other direction. I guarantee that. So yeah, I just think, and this is part of the schooling aspect, right? You've seen presentations here now where you talk about don't look for a specific type of person. Don't look for someone who just has a 4-year degree. You're really limiting your ability to get great talent. Some of the people that I've worked with that were the smartest, most awesome developers I've ever worked with didn't go to college, right? And that's not something, 10 years ago, that's something that would have been held against them, right? They wouldn't have been able to get a job, right? It's just difficult. Or you don't have the experience. Well, if I don't get hired, I can't get the experience, right? I spent the last 4 years in school, and now no one will hire me. So yeah, this is where I got to talking about the 7 programming languages that I know. And I'm 100% a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I will own that, but I'm fine with that space. I will call COBOL my home language for a long, long time. But yeah, so I start filling roles based on product rather than projects, right? You're not hiring somebody to perform a specific function. You're hiring them to support a specific product. If you're open up to the thought of that, and you're picking the best person for the role, and not necessarily based on what their degree is, right? And you're going to find better people. You've seen it in the keynote speeches. They were art majors, and now they're big keynote speakers at a conference. So broaden the horizons a little bit, look for other people. And hopefully this resonates with some people. That's my contact information. I don't care that I work for TaskTop. I'm open up to conversations with anybody about this across the board. I don't do the DevOps for Enterprise Systems User Group Conference anymore, just because of a time constraint. But other than that, I'm still open to talking about mainframe development, any types of adoption. I wrote a unpublished white paper 4 years ago regarding adoption of legacy modernization tools. So I'm open to have a conversation with anybody. And any questions? Yeah, so once I found out that the mainframe was kind of separated, right, from everybody else, you realize that they didn't have visibility into work that was being completed in other areas, right? So if you had, like I was talking about how looking at things in a product perspective, right? You may have pieces of this that are found within the mainframe, and the mainframe team does that work, right? But you may have a front-end piece that ties back into the mainframe, right, that is held by a completely different team, right, that has ownership and no visibility back into that piece of the code, right? So if you make all these changes from a mainframe perspective and you're not including the Java people in this process, if you're not including the other side of things and linking tickets together, which some companies are getting better at, I will admit that, but you complete all this work for your mainframe side of things with very minimal testing, because there's not a lot of testing around for the mainframe now. You're completing all that work without essential visibility into what's being done from the front end standpoint, right? And that's where these integrated tool chains can come into play, where if your stuff is integrated and you come in, like there's an epic that comes in at a higher level, and you separate that into work that needs to be done on a specific technology at that point, right? You're saying this story needs to be completed by these mainframe folks, or needs to be completed by a mainframe developer. and this story needs to be completed by a distributed developer, and that came from the same epic down, but it might go to a completely different tool. We talked about how the mainframe was working out of RTC in some situations, and they didn't have visibility back into that, right? And now you take the two completely different tools in Jira and RTC, and you sync those stories together, so those developers never ever have to leave RTC. They're working in that space. They don't have any desire to do duplicated effort, right? You don't want to have them changing something in RTC and then going back and making a change to a story on Jira just to make sure it bubbles up from a reporting standpoint. So not only do you get visibility back into it when you connect those two tools together, right? You're also getting a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information being passed back and forth, and you're getting collaboration, right? If you see notes from the Java side come back up to the epic level, and that epic level is synced to RTC as well, right? Then you have your parent-child relationship in RTC built up, where you can still see that information, and you have your parent-child in Jira as well. Does that make sense? The answer is yes, but I would say it's very minimal and something that it's not really fleshed out yet. I know my last conversation with the engineers at IBM, it's something they were going down that road and trying to accomplish and make it more efficient, right? I mean, probably within 10 years, mainframe will be able to run efficiently off the cloud, right? And the technology will change, but the underlying infrastructure will stay the same, right? Anything else? Yep. I would say that stuff is very minimal in the mainframe space. And a lot of things I see are mostly written in-house type of stuff. Sending information back to something like the elk stack, right? If you're taking logs and send it back to to something consumable that you can put in a dashboard format, you get that kind of stuff. Now it isn't exactly real time, right? It's more like a couple minutes later kind of thing, which I think it's still better than what we had before, but that's still a space that it needs to grow, right? APM within that space really needs to see a boost. Like you won't see a Dynatrace, option for mainframe right now. So, all right, I think give you a couple minutes back. Thank you.